So the case we're talking about was Melissa Caddick, who was a financial advisor or styled herself as a financial advisor and who it's alleged she stole more than $20 million from her clients, and her clients were her family and friends primarily, and we're talking more or less out and out theft. She told them she invested on their behalf in certain shares and investments, and she didn't do that. She just stole the money, and then she disappeared. And so there's been a lot of theories about where she's gone or what she's up to, and then her foot was discovered, and so just the foot. So we don't know whether she's dead or alive, and we don't know where she is. So that's kind of added to the mystery of the whole story.
And of course, she gathered up wealth, I guess, around this, unless
Yes.
it was squandered. So of course, there's family, friends that they may be the ones that she actually took the money from in this particular case, but certainly someone in the family close to her partner, whatever, may be in a position to financially benefit from her behaviour.
Right, and so that's a very interesting part of the story, and it happens a lot in these type of cases. In her case, there's two houses. There's the house she owned with her husband, and there's a house that she owned with her parents, where her parents live. And so there's now been court proceedings about who owns those houses. Should the victims of her alleged crime, should they get the benefit? One house has been sold, the house she lived, for $9.8 million, so it's a very significant asset, and it appears that the victims are going to get access to all of that money and the husband won't. And the reason for that is the husband can't show that he's contributed financially to the house at all, so it wouldn't be fair for him to benefit from the proceeds of her crime. Whereas the house that belongs to her parents have put a lot of money into, and her parents live there, so it's a different complexion, and there's a very interesting kind of question, both legal and kind of ethical, around, well, if the parents have bought this house or have at least contributed financially, should they be kicked out of their own house because of the crimes of their daughter, which it's not alleged that they were involved in any way or even had any knowledge of. So it's a very interesting question.
And it seems that from reading newspaper articles where most of these types of high-level corporate theft, if you like, and it's usually someone involved in administration that has access to funds, that the money trail seems to go to this endless path of, well, not endless, it does have an end, of gambling, where there's no result, there's no asset, there's nothing left to pursue, but there's still potentially a husband or parents that are involved in the financial world of this particular person. Are they under any legal obligation to perhaps support his or her habit?
Right. So I certainly agree with that. And all the cases I've done, I'm a dispute resolution specialist, and I deal with a lot of business owners. And all of the cases I've done where owners have been ripped off by an employee, and often a senior employee, often someone who's involved in the finances of the business, all of them, without any exception, all of them have been to fund gambling. So the employee has, I think, otherwise been a law-abiding person, and what's really tempted them, what's led them to break the law in this case is their gambling addiction. And so a lot of the time the money's gone straight into the pokies or straight to the casino or the horses or whatever it is that they're gambling, and then it's gone. But other times, I know in Melissa Caddick's case, that's not one I was personally involved in, but there is significant assets that she's built up over time, and now the husband and the parents potentially are going to be affected by that. The law basically says if you've contributed financially to an asset, then you should get that contribution back. So if you paid for half the house, you should get half the house, sort of thing. You should get half of the equity when it's sold. But if you haven't contributed at all, and that was the case with her husband, he hadn't contributed at all, she contributed the full amount, then that asset should be sold, and the benefit of it, the funds from the sale, should go to the victims of the crime. That's the general position.
Society's changed a lot in my lifetime. It concerns myself and a lot of other people that I socialise with, is that nobody seems to have any appetite to do anything about changing the landscape that is completely different now because of the curse of gambling on our society. Are we going to just have to learn to live with this?
Yes, well, that's an excellent question. Certainly I know in my lifetime, when my mum used to cross the border into New South Wales to gamble and then come back, and now go to Crown Casino. Everything's changed in Melbourne and in Victoria. It's been a huge change. There have been some cases brought against the gambler. Crown Casino was sued for misleading and deceptive conduct in relation to their poker machines. And there were some cases in New South Wales against Star City, which was one of the cases about a problem gambler being allowed to gamble while he's intoxicated. And there's a specific rule up there. The New South Wales Casino Control Act says you're not allowed to gamble when you're intoxicated, and of course many people do. So there's both, but both those cases were unsuccessful. So I think the law is progressing in that direction. I think eventually someone will be able to sue a venue, a gambling venue for gambling losses, but at the moment the courts haven't allowed it. And so I think it's really up to the regulators to move on this. And there's just so much money involved. I mean, I don't know if we can reasonably expect our regulators to do anything about it.
No, it's very sad, and legally it's interesting because it seems to be more and more acceptable that gambling addiction is actually an illness,
yes.
and it's not a choice. So
yes.
In a legal sense, when you're challenging a casino, let's say, for example, for allowing you to gamble, knowing full well that you had an illness, is that potentially going to change the landscape?
Yes, I think that's the way the law's headed. I think people are recognising more and more that problem gambling is not just a choice. And I think people are also recognising that the casinos are doing more than just allowing people to gamble. They're actively encouraging. In some of the cases that have been before the courts, the gambler has approached the venue and asked to be banned. They've asked to have their chips not cashed. They've asked to be to have their account shut down, that sort of stuff when they're feeling good, and then when they've had a lapse, if you like, and they've gone back to gambling, that the casino has encouraged them, or there was an RSL that organised a bus for this person to come, and so on. So there's certainly lots of examples of them actively encouraging, and I think at some point the courts will find in probably a very extraordinary case or a very extreme case, they'll find in favour of the gambler, and actually a case against these venues will be successful. But ultimately, these things need to be led by regulations, by the Parliament, not by the courts. And often it's a sad state of affairs. Me as a lawyer, I see a lot of social issues being decided in the courts when really they should be decided in public debate and in the Parliament. That's where the judges shouldn't be making new law. That's for the Parliament to do. And but unfortunately, I think the reality is that often it ends up in the courts because the Parliament shy away from these difficult issues.
I have a simplistic view about this. I have friends who gamble responsibly, and it's a joyous part of their life, and I have no problem. They should be allowed to do that. The problem for me has not been I don't ever want to shut down gambling, but it's the advertising of it. And from a legal sense, is it almost getting to the stage now where we could potentially see someone sue a media outlet for the advertising that has caused the problem for them to then have an addiction?
Yeah, I think you could certainly, a case could be brought for anything, so you could certainly sue. I think we're a long way from a case like that being successful. I think the advertising, as long as they're complying with the advertising laws, and you'll see certainly in Victoria the laws have got tougher. Some of the gambling ads now, at the end they have the problem gambling picture and some information, which I think is a good step in the right direction. But I think we're a long way from that, and we're probably still a while away from somebody suing a gambling venue as long as they're complying with their rights. But I think over time we'll see more and more cases as people get more and more frustrated with this, and the knowledge moves on to realise that the people who are problem gamblers have a serious problem. They're not just making a couple of bad choices, and they're really being encouraged by the gambling venues to gamble to excess.
We've certainly seen some cases in court already in this. Do you think we might see more of this that may force Parliament's hand, either a state parliament or federally, to start putting a different framework in place?
Yes, well, we certainly. We've seen some of that with drinking and sport and that kind of unhealthy habits. And I think gambling is all across sport and all across a lot of popular industries. And I think there are individual sports people and individual influencers, if you like, who are against that. And I think that will. Commercial pressure, I think, is probably the strongest pressure you can bring to bear on this. And if sponsors start walking away because they don't want to be associated with gambling, or if athletes or big name celebrities start walking away as a result of an association with gambling, I think that might lead to change. But that's really a commercial pressure rather than a regulatory one. I just hope as time goes on and people learn more about gambling and the impacts on gambling, like drugs and other social problems, drinking, of course, the regulations will evolve, and the regulations around what you need to do to run an RSL or a pokies venue or a casino will get tougher.
In your profession, you can be one of two ways. You can be defending either side of the argument. It just seems to me at the moment that in a lot of legal situations there's plenty of loopholes for you to play with. This is a question completely off beam. You may or may not be able to answer it, but do lawmakers deliberately leave loopholes to make your task more entertaining? Because it just seems so bizarre that,
yes.
that the simple little change of wording of a law could take away a lot of need for you to actually even be involved.
Yes, yes. Well, I'd like to think that certainly there's always. I mean, people always argue about things, right? And that's not, lawyers didn't invent that. That people argue, and when there's a lot of money involved and there's a lot on the line, people argue and people have different points of view. But I think often what happens is change is made in Parliament, and it's made quickly and it's made for political reasons, and they don't really think it through all the way to the logical conclusion. They don't spend the time drafting the legislation and getting feedback from the industry and all that sort of stuff, because that's all very boring. They want to sort of announce a new change and that they've taken tough action and quick action and all of that. And so that often leads to these things being rushed, and certainly some of the legislation that's come out around gambling and around proceeds of crime and around consumer protection stuff has been rushed, and although the legislation might be very long, it sort of contradicts itself in places, and ultimately when there's money involved and emotions run high, people end up hiring lawyers to argue both sides of the coin, and it's the court who have to work out who's right and who's wrong in each circumstance. So I think it's often carelessness rather than deliberate effort to just give lawyers like me a job.
Yeah, just on that, so our legal system seems to be very clogged up at the moment, Alex. There's a lot of these cases that are causing problem, the ones like this that get down to just a loophole style argument that clogs the system.
Yes, I think what's probably clogged the system the most is we've got a lot of consumer tribunals which make it very easy to bring an action. So we've got a lot of, I think, legal cases which should have been resolved in mediation, and people think, I'm not going to do this, I'm just going to go off to court, whether that's the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal or the financial ombudsman or whatever. There's a whole lot of tribunals where people can bring claims, and they're really, really easy to bring. Certainly in VCAT, it's very easy to bring a claim. It costs you about $30 and everyone's off doing it, and it takes you about 2 years to get a hearing. So I wouldn't say it's the loopholes that are clogging up so much as the kind of the consumer movement in the courts to make it easy to litigate, and we want to make it, I think, difficult to litigate and get people to sort out their problems by mediation and alternative dispute resolution, because going off to court's no good for anyone.
No, and so I suppose, does that come down to people in your position advising clients correctly, or is it just a matter of educating more judges, building more courts and having a bigger system?
Oh, yeah, look, I think the lawyers do have are responsible and accountable for some of this, or should be more accountable. There are certainly plenty of lawyers who make a lot of money out of riling up clients rather than talking them into a sensible commercial resolution. And so I think the legal profession does should be more accountable to, and it is over time that the courts are overseeing what lawyers do more and more. But yeah, I think the lawyers getting excited about running big cases rather than trying to seek sensible commercial resolutions is a big part of this. You should be, if you can, resolve your matter by a discussion rather than by going off to court.
Just on a personal question, Alex, you've obviously been in the legal system a long time. Do you still enjoy going to work?
I do. I love it. So I run my own business, Taurus Legal Management, and I think owning your own business, you talk to other business owners, that's an exciting place to be. People like, as a business owner, you like dealing with other business owners and finding out about their business and their issues and all of that. And I think I'm probably at a level of seniority where I get to do the interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Once when you spend, I've been doing it. I've been an admitted lawyer for almost 20 years. And so I think when you're in your first 5 or 10 years, you're doing the grind, if you like, of drafting the affidavits and all that stuff, which can be tough work. But I really enjoy meeting different people and hearing different stories and making an impact where you can. We live in a legal world, so if you're a lawyer who runs a law firm, you can actually make a very significant impact for business owners in the community.